We've got a great panel lined up for you right now. It'll be well worth the wait. Now, as Sarvesh said, I am David Berlin. I'm the editor-in-chief of ProgrammableWeb.com. And for those of you who are not familiar with Programmable Web, we are the world's leading community, online community, where the providers and consuming developers of internet-accessible APIs go to find each other. We're also the web's journal of the API economy, where we chronicle the events and trends that are going on a 7 days a week, a daily basis. And we also have our site full of great advice and content, tips, tutorials for both developers and API providers who are at various stages of their API journeys. Now, we have millions of visitors who come to Programmable Web each year, and they're driving tens of millions of page views, but well more than half of those visitors are developers who are trying to figure out which of the more than 15,000 APIs that are in our API directory are they going to use in their next mobile or web application. And even more importantly, they're trying to figure out where the next great opportunity in the API economy lies. Now, for those of you who are API providers looking to attract developers or partners to your API, and it's not yet listed in our directory, my only question to you is, what are you waiting for? Because Programmable Web is the world's best and free opportunity to promote and drive the discoverability of your offerings. Now, 3 companies whose APIs are in our directory are Uber, DocuSign, and Capital One. And they're here today to talk a little bit about their visions when it comes to APIs. I've handpicked them because they come from entirely different industries. And so they're going to each give you a very unique perspective that hopefully you can take home to your jobs and put to work for you. So the way I've organized this is I've asked our representatives from each company. We've got Naveed Anwar from Capital One. We've got Adam Rogal from Uber in the middle, and Marie Huve from DocuSign, for 5 minutes to spend to tell us a little bit about who they are, what their path has been to get to this point, who they work for, what they do there, and also a little bit about the API visions of those particular companies. And once they're done, we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into those respective visions to learn a little bit more about what they're up to. So let's get the show started, and we'll turn it over to you, Naveed, to talk a little bit about what you're doing at Capital One.
Thank you. How's everyone doing? Excited on a morning over here. Hungover from last night. My name is Naveed Anwar. I'm also known as the Ball Geek in the community. I've been at Capital One for about a year now, run the developer platform, and oversee product and engineering. Prior to that, I spent 6 years at PayPal doing similar stuff, running the developer platform over there. And prior to that, at AOL and Netscape, doing similar things. Capital One, for folks in the room, can I get a show of hands? How many of you guys are Capital One customers? Hey,
yeah,
quite a bit. For folks who don't know about the company, it's been around for about 20 years, and it was formed on the basis of information technology as well as data-driven solutions can actually help you lead and create good financial products for consumers. That's the basis on which the company was formed, and it's been very innovative in the way that we have been actually bringing solutions to both the consumer and the merchant community. And the one thing that excited me the most for joining the company was that it's still a founder-led company, so the spirit of innovation and the spirit of actually going and having that entrepreneur opportunity within the company still exists. As such, the API journey at Capital One has been there for about several years, focusing really internally to make sure that we are creating reusable services that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time that you're actually building a feature in the product. And then the commitment that we actually announced in March from Capital One's perspective, where we launched Capital One Dev Exchange, which was our declaration to the outside world that we're really serious about our platform approach. And now we'll be actually going after a third customer segment. Before it was consumers, merchants, and now developer as a customer segment. And we announced our platform in beta at South by Southwest, and the feedback has been pretty decent. The goal behind the launch was to make sure that we can actually bake it well or harden it well with the community, get feedback, make it easy for people to access. And we went after a range of API products, all the way from working with partners to individual developers and creating those opportunities.
Great. OK, thanks, Navid. All right, so next we'll go to Adam at Uber.
Yeah. Hey everyone, Adam Rogel, Head of Engineering of Developer Platform at Uber. I am, I guess, the balding geek in the Bay Area. So I've been at Uber for about 15 months now, which makes me a veteran by Uber standards. And really, my journey to Uber was really focusing on just making awesome APIs and helping developers. I was at Google for about 7.5 years, working in the developer relations team. Working mostly on ads. So started off with checkout, and that was PayPal, did a great job of hurting that. Then went over to AdWords APIs and made all the money for Google, and then it was just like, I need to go do something cool. I got to make some APIs that don't involve banner ads or ads and work on something awesome. I was approached by Uber, and they said, hey, how would you like to run the API platform? And my first question was, Uber has an API? And I kind of realized that, really there's this really magical moment experience that we can create where it can almost become, telepathic that you need an Uber right now. And the whole idea that we came across is our tagline of build moving experiences. So we want to provide APIs that allow conversational bots to schedule a ride for you to be there immediately. We want to enhance the trip experience by perhaps, showing you 10 newsfeed items that you really want to see on your way to work. We really just want to make the experience overall just awesome because that fits with the Uber brand of just making a really, really great ride experience for our consumers. In terms of where we're headed, we want to work with all these other API partners across the industry, really help set awesome standards for developer relations and what it means to be a great API, and also just really set a standard for developer empathy, right? You want to make things for developers, and you want your developers to be happy, sort of the table stakes of developer platform. And I think, I do think that there's been a big shift in the industry lately around developer empathy, and I'm really glad and excited to be a part of it.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Marie, you're up.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm Marie Huve, VP of Developer Marketing at DocuSign. I have been there, this is my 4th month. And yeah, so a little even less than your tenure. The tenure goes down as you go to the left in this panel. And I'm also the first person in my function, a said function at DocuSign. So I was hired to build the developer programs, marketing, outreach, evangelism efforts for the DocuSign API. I previously was at Microsoft. I was the general manager of developer tools marketing there for some time. I started out there as the product manager for a product called Visual C++, for those of you who are ever C++ developers. It was a mighty product, and I love it to this day. But anyway, and before that, I worked at another software company, once known as Borland, and did product marketing for a couple products like Delphi and Borland C++. So anyway, so I've clearly been around. I'm showing my age. But I came to DocuSign because I thought the opportunity for developers was so exciting there. DocuSign, for those of you who don't know it, is a global e-signature platform. Some would say very trusted, and some would say very loved. I get more people, and this did not happen necessarily when I worked at Microsoft, to come up, I love you, DocuSign! You made my life so easy in this way or that way or the other way. So it's exciting to join a company like that, and particularly one where there's about, I think, 85,000 new users every day that join the DocuSign Global Trust Network, and that is up about 90% from last year, so it's a very rapidly growing company. About 950 million transactions last year ran through the DocuSign API, ran through DocuSign app and API, and well over half of those are now through the API. And that's something that's been growing steadily, and some might say significantly, over the last couple of years, and almost organically, because the company had such a strong platform engineering group. The API has become something that's powerful and flexible, and while people don't really always want to send their customers off to the DocuSign app, they want to integrate e-signatures into their workflow, and they want to make digital transaction management something that's pretty seamless in their company. And so we have a lot to do in terms of our experience. I think we've come a ways, but we have a lot. This idea of developer empathy that Adam brought up, I think, is super important. So is transparency, which is a little bit what Naveed was talking about. And I think we have an opportunity not only to expand the touch points of the digital transaction that DocuSign can help with. We're doing something called transaction rooms right now that we just launched, but also digital signatures around the world is not necessarily the same beast as it is here in the United States, and the stringent requirements are different, and the kind of keys that people need, and in some places it's like the CHOP or the eHunko, et cetera. So we have a lot of opportunity from a global perspective as well.
Great, thanks, Marie. All right, so we're just going to start asking some questions, and I've told the panelists ahead of time that if one panelist says something that the other one doesn't agree with, feel free to jump in so we can get a little controversy going here if we need to. Adam, I'm going to ask you first, because you talked about developer empathy. And at Programmable Web, we are writing all the time about the importance of the developer experience. I think those two are related, but I'm not sure. How do you define developer empathy, and what are the things that you do, and how do you know when you've succeeded in delivering that?
Yeah, that's something that I've definitely been defining over my career. I think it kind of goes back down to when you just define what empathy is in general. A good friend actually told me about, do you know the difference between sympathy and empathy? And I'm like, no, not really, but sounds like you're about to tell me. And he was like, sympathy is you walk past someone in a hole and you're like, man, it sucks you're in that hole. And empathy is you get down in the hole and you lift them out. And I think the same thing applies to developer empathy, where it's when you limit the gap between what the developer actually thinks you think about them and what you're doing, and you show that you're out there and you're giving away tons of stuff for free and you're working directly with them and you're showing that you're one of them, then that really, really resonates with them. What I tried to do in our organization was I really disliked at places like Google, where developer relations and engineering sat on different sides of the fence. They were, this idea that I would go up to an engineer and be like, dude, I love you. It was awesome hanging out yesterday. By the way, can you do me a quick favor? I really just need you to change this one line in this builder on this SDK because it's causing all these Stack Overflow questions. He's like, not in the OKRs, can't do it. And it's just that one line change could have affected so many developers. So what I did was I was like, no more. At Uber, I started up this engineering org where partner engineers and platform engineers sit next to each other. They go to lunch together. They're part of the same reporting structure. And that resonates throughout the entire business. When they're talking to folks out in conferences, when they're on Stack Overflow, I have my API engineers answer the Stack Overflow questions. It's these little things that you keep on doing that change the business and change the idea of, those engineers don't care about me, to something that, I think, where you're actually talking, you have a great conversation with them.
It's a bit of PR function in some ways, right?
Yeah, it's developer relations, right?
Yeah. You mentioned Stack Overflow. Is that where you conduct the majority of your online developer relations, where developers are asking questions and you're responding, or do you have your own forums?
So we use Stack Overflow as our main support channel. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about Stack Overflow is the community was actually answering all of our questions for us, and we were like, here's some sweatshirts, here's some swag. It was awesome to kind of see that, and that saves time for your engineers because they don't have to do it as much, and it really, a lot of companies have these developer experts, and the GDEs that Google does really, really well, and you just kind of have to create an army of advocates for you out in the wild and reward them, and that feedback loop, that flywheel effect just help spread the good word of your platform.
Naveed, you sounded like you wanted to jump in there.
I'm couldn't, everything that Adam said totally makes sense. I mean, that was one of the reasons why we were very explicit when we chose the name Capital One Dev Exchange, because this is not just about us going out there and making certain APIs available. This is an actual equal value of exchange, right? Like, you got to make sure that what's the value proposition that you're creating over here for that end developer. Look, they're going to invest their time in utilizing your API. They're going to be investing their energy in building something great for the consumers. And if you're not taking the feedback, and hence the reason why we didn't do a big fanfare and go out do a big launch, we purposely chose to keep it at a beta perspective, because that feedback and working with developers, and particularly around, if you create developer councils, right? Councils in which you can actually get feedback directly from the early adopters, that really helps you shape your platform to massive adoption. And going back to Adam's point about having the community engage, no better way to actually have your questions answered than when someone else becomes your advocate, right? Like, you can't hire an army of evangelists and build a big org out. What you want to embed is a couple of smart people and then create this ripple effect across the globe to have that community outreach as well as engagement in the ecosystem.
One of the things that we advocate at Programmable Web is that when you're building your APIs, you get the developers involved, even ones you don't know, very early in that process, so that you're getting feedback from them before you go to a general availability, because you're just heading for a train wreck if you do it the other way around, which, by the way, plenty of API providers do. And this does not only apply to APIs that you're making externally available, but also internally available to your organization. You mentioned that you released the beta version of Developer Exchange at South by Southwest. I hope you had a good time down there, by the way.
Great time.
Quite a zoo. Was that your intention there, to get it in the hands of developers, to get some feedback before you go to general availability? And how's that gone?
Absolutely, that was the plan, because even before we actually made them available out at South by Southwest, we had been working with developers in the community prior to that as well. So to your point, don't build and expect someone to kind of just utilize it. You got to really make sure that you're building something that people want. So having that kind of design thinking approach when you're actually building a product, it's also a design thinking approach when you're actually building an API. Build something that the community is asking for. You're actually solving a pain point. In that regard, so far the feedback has been great. I mean, it's really helping us go in different directions. The 3 products that we release all are targeting different customer segments, right? Our API product for credit offers, which allows you to get onboarded with credit cards, is very much a regulated environment in which we are working with our existing affiliates, but giving them an API approach of actually pre-qualifying customers before they actually end up on a Capital One site. Our identity product that we've released takes us beyond financial kind of realm of utilizing two-factor authentication in multiple use cases. So from that opportunity perspective, we've received great feedback, and it's just the start. I know all of you guys have the Warriors on your mind, but we feel that in our beta, we are kind of in the first few minutes of the first quarter, and there's a lot more to do with the feedback that we're receiving.
Hey, Marie, you said that more than half of the transactions that are taking place on DocuSign's infrastructure are API-driven. In other words, they're not coming from the user interface. They're literally programmatic.
Yes.
I find it impossible to believe that they're already, you said something, 85,000 new users a day, 950 million transactions. I'm incredulous at the fact that they took this long to get somebody into the role that you now have at DocuSign. They've gotten that far without somebody like you. How do they manage that?
Well, Keith, I hope you're not listening. No, so it's actually easy when you have. It's easy to get to that point. It's not necessarily easy to go beyond it. Let me just put it that way. I think it's easy to get to that point if you have a great platform and a great experience, and somebody in engineering really cared that the API represented that, so that if Adam at Uber wants to integrated into some sort of a procurement workflow that they're doing, or something that's not necessarily.
There was some wheeling and dealing going on backstage, by the way.
Recruitment. This is more of an HR use case. This is more of a procurement use case over here. But what you'll find, what we've done is we've built up. We've gone from a lot of real estate companies and a lot of individuals using DocuSign, and built really rapidly over probably the last 5 years through a bunch of different industries, including financial services, insurance, healthcare, government, et cetera, and a lot of different departmental use cases, whether that's sales and marketing, or operations and procurement, or even sort of financials, the finance group or something. And you'll find that, I think what happened was, the API was great. It's not perfect, but it's great. And the companies who had a hunger to bring the complexity and all the paper and crap out of their workflow, and e-signature was such a wonderful way to help them do that, they said, I don't want to go to your app. I want to integrate that. And they did. And by God, those are the stickiest. So in other words, those customers are much less likely to rip you out if they've integrated your API. Two, the transaction volume grows exponentially instead of in a linear fashion. And so that's one of the reasons why we have seen such a growth of transactions out of the API. And they tend to scratch the surface. And so that's what I mean by that's not good enough. You can have a great first use case or second use case in a company, but if you're not really enabling and empowering the developers to see what they can do next, because you have a really strong API first strategy, and you have a public API strategy, and you're transparent, and you give a shit about the developer experience. If you don't have those things, you'll only grow to a certain point.
How much of, I use DocuSign. I've encountered it in some, where I'm a customer of somebody, and suddenly they say, hey, you got to do this, and I sign the thing online. And so I'm one of those 85,000 that come each day.
Yeah.
How do you, is that a channel of conversion? In other words, like suddenly a developer or an organization encounters DocuSign that way, and then they're like, oh, what's this?
Yes.
How do I take advantage of it? So describe, because you weren't around out there marketing the API, so they must have figured it out some other way. Was this the channel?
Oh, sure. Well, I will say that there was a set of engineers who put on marketing hats.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And they said, okay, so what can we do in order to use the developers that we do have and reach more? But they did not build out any what I would call repeatable, consistent tools and resources for developers. It's something that's really started in the last year, I would say. And so it's pretty, it's a testimony to the demand for something like DocuSign. But there's going to be a lot of people who will fill a niche. You can be a first mover in something. A lot of people can come and fill the niche, fill up behind you, especially as digital transaction management grows as a category. And then if your developer experience isn't right, if you're trying to be a platform company, be a platform company, do your API right, be API first, have early access programs, be transparent with developers. If you just want to be an app, that's different.
Just so everybody knows what we're talking about, API first, your definition of that is?
My definition of API first is you build the API and release it before you build the app that you are selling on top of it yourself.
Okay.
So you can do that by just doing it with an early access program, but if you build your app and then you fill out the API so the developers can treat it more like a platform, you're API second.
You mentioned first mover.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
Just the API first, I think, is it's a good approach, but I would actually take it one step further and say that the true power of APIs is you can do things that the app would never be able to do.
That's
right? So with Uber, the table stakes are for us to be able to request a ride, right? That's, when I was like first looking at the platform and we didn't even have that API yet, I said, okay, step one, at least let's just be able to request a ride through the API, right? That's the no-brainer, right? The next step after that is what APIs can we do so that we are democratizing the power of our platform for other developers, right? And that is the step beyond thinking API first, because it's never going to be app second. It's just API only. You're creating something that is now more powerful for the developers,
So
right?
you see yourself as one of many apps
I don't. I think I don't.
from an Uber
Yeah,
ride. Because you're a software company. I mean, you have a service.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
built
think
around
apps are
software.
going to go away, right? I think it's going to be everything's going to be message and bots, and it's going to
Okay.
be
All
it's
right.
going to everything's going to consolidate down to the
Okay.
pillars of everything, and it's going to be integrations into those.
Interesting.
And providing an API allows you to now get into that
the app is
space.
virtual.
You got Naveed's adrenaline going
Yeah.
here
Look-
about that, so let's...
Look, when I think about API first, I can't think of a better example than Uber. And Adam, you can pay me later for saying this. It's like if you look at
You paid him before.
if you look at the
20%.
application, what is Uber's main purpose? Its main purpose is to get you from one destination to other destination and request a ride, right? When I look at that app, I use that as an example with most of my developers internally. It's like, look, they built a great application, but then they actually integrate it with great experiences. Uber didn't go and build the best mapping application, they integrated with Google. Uber didn't go create the best notification system, they integrated with
Yeah.
Twilio. Uber didn't actually create the best music service, they're integrating with Spotify. So when you're building an application which is extensible, you're talking about allowing others to actually integrate with you, but also making your features available in their experiences as well.
Yes.
So I think as developers who are sitting in the audience, if you're thinking about building your app, think about the core experience that you can actually control, but then all the other nuances of all the other features that you want to add, there's obviously a solution out there, and think about the companies that you can actually integrate with and then package that experience together.
Instead of there's an app for that, there's an API for that.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that programmable web does
That's right. We're going to make that our tagline.
There's an API.
I'll pay you or give you some free advertising for that later. Thank you
bless.
very much. You brought up the bot thing, so let's go there because I know that a good example is if you're a Slack user, there's a bot you can install. It just says "Call me an Uber." So
Yeah.
you've just gone right past all the applications, anything that would actually deal with
I
it.
have a great story about that too, the Slack bot. Yeah.
And you mentioned that apps are going to go away. This is absolutely a fundamental, we're at a tipping point in the application economy if we're talking about apps themselves going away, and now we're looking at just, multitude of client avenues into your functionality.
Sure.
Messaging, Facebook Messenger, Slack, et
Are
cetera.
these
So
experiences?
Yeah,
Is that
that's what I would say
Yeah.
is that apps are very rudimentary, where it's sort of like, come here and use
Do
this
this.
right here. I took an Uber here today. The way I ordered that Uber was
Surprise.
is that
Yeah.
free? Do you get a free?
we get some credits.
Okay.
If you need a ride, home later, I'll let you.
if anybody needs a ride back to San
Yeah.
Francisco, you can.
Yeah.
Adam's giving free credits.
Yeah, exactly. So the way I ordered my Uber today was I said, Alexa, ask Uber for a ride. And then, Alexa responds like, hey, surge is 1.2x. Would you like to accept? And you go 1.2, and your surge is now arriving. Like your Uber's now arriving. And I love that experience where it's like I'm putting on my shoes. I'm trying to describe to my wife what I'm about to go to today. She doesn't really understand about what this conference is. Meanwhile, my Uber's coming, right? Like I was able to have that conversational experience with a device in my home. Now that's very different than opening up an Uber app and having to put the pin down and figure out the location and request it and then watch the screen. I have an assistant doing that. I have a bot doing that. And then the Slack integration was actually a really, really cool, heartwarming actually integration where we didn't make that integration. A coding school made that integration.
A coding school?
Yeah, it was App Academy, and it was basically like we have some connections with App
That's
Academy,
cool.
and they were like, hey, we saw all these cool things that Slack's doing now. There's no Uber one. Can we make it for you guys? And we're like, yeah, sure. So we went over.
on.
Yeah. So all I did was supply the pizza and the Red Bull, and I brought my engineers to there, and we hung out with them and helped them create it. And it was cool because we got to see, okay, so if everything's going to be text-based, then we need to figure out how to do surge acceptance here, and how do you hook in the API for this and that. And I love that. I love teaching, and I love sort of watching things be built, and that was really cool, really awesome experience.
I want to switch gears a little bit. You mentioned first movers earlier, Marie,
Yes.
and
No pun intended.
each of each of your companies are essentially first movers in their markets, right? I mean, that's another reason I picked you guys. You know, we've got digital signatures, we've got ride sharing, and banking. And to be clear, I don't know if everybody knows this, but Capital One is actually the first bank in the U.S. to publish APIs the way they've done. It's happening a little more in Europe because of some regulations that are happening over there, but you're a first mover in this respect. And the takeaway could be that for each of the members of our audience here, it may be just as important for them to be the first mover in their industry to seize some serious competitive advantage. So could each of you just kind of talk to that point a little bit, how important that was in terms of competitive advantage and sustainability of your businesses? I'll start with you because you have a big challenge. You have to deal in a regulatory environment. So there's a few more challenges in terms of launching APIs for you than there are for other companies.
First, I'd like to plug in, similar to the experience of Alexa, we actually also launched our skill with Alexa where you can actually do financial transactions with the Echo device, and obviously there are other opportunities coming down the way. But look, the challenges start I didn't expect that I would hit these many challenges coming from a non-regulated environment when I was working to a regulated environment. There are a lot of nuances, and for all the right reasons, right? First and foremost, you got to have a belief from the top, right? Like you really have to have the support all the way down from the CEO level. This can't be a project building APIs and doing a platform strategy just on the side of your desk, right? I mean, you're not going to succeed in that one. There is always how many of you guys work in a matrix organization, right? Like you always deal with challenges of convincing the stakeholders, right? So I think we did a lot of that empathy work internally within the company by convincing of why we should be doing this. Now it's really focusing on how, right? Like how are we going to execute? What are we actually going to bring out to the market which is going to be different than what the community is asking for? And then last but not least is you got to have a regular cadence, right? You can't just be releasing one thing in March and then disappear till next March, right? You have to have that cadence in which you're agile. And again, in a large organization, a lot of you guys probably have gone through the transformation. But we're now down to kind of doing sprints which are releasing features on a much regular basis. So those are the kind of things that keeps you in the competitive advantage space. And at the end of the day, you got to have the value proposition, right? What's the value proposition to the user who's actually going to invest their time in actually utilizing your API?
So everyone knows really the story of Uber, right? I mean, it's something that everyone kind of points to and goes wow, it's so awesome how they grew and grew and grew, and they really push forward a lot with transforming the world around them. And when I kind of talk about first movers in terms of APIs, I kind of go back to my early days at Uber, which again 15 months ago, veteran, right? But it was my 4th day at Uber, and I was kind of thrown into everything where I was told, hey, Adam, welcome to Uber. In 2 weeks, you need to launch the request to ride API. I was like, okay. I came from Google where I would have had probably 6 months to do that. And so it's a very, very different environment now. And on my 4th day, I sat down. We called them jam sessions at Uber with Travis Kalanick and Jeff Holden. And I'm sitting in this meeting, and I'm just going wow, they could just tell me right now that they don't want to do the API, and I'd just be my 4th day, head of engineering developer platform, all right, I'm out. I'll just pack my bag. But and I had this session with them, and they were so excited about the API because they're we're going to be the first ones that have this API out there. It's going to be free. It's going to be open. It's going to be awesome. We want to see all the cool innovation be built on top of it. My girlfriend bakes awesome cookies. I want her to be able to deliver the cookies. I'm not kidding. Right then, she walked in with cookies. I'm like, this is perfect, and it was awesome. Wow. And I just love that conversation. I love that story because it was the real people behind this company that were excited about what I was going to be building, and I was basically entrusted with that power. And I think, kind of bringing this back to the first movers, it's when you create a company where you have a lot of individuals who feel that passion and want to take those risks and those big, bold bets, that's where you really get to those magical moments. And I really thank our leadership for really empowering us to do that.
I think particularly around making those bold bets, right? Like not every one of those will pay off. So you have to have the appetite of actually failing fast, learning fast, and then go make another bet as well. So I think in that regard, I mean, all three companies have been innovative in that in pushing out the agenda from a competitive advantage point of view.
Yeah, and I would say once you've decided, it sometimes does take a fearless champion approach to being, to really getting API, to stick with my API first, and not, I thought going beyond that was awesome, but to at least be API first, you have to be a fearless champion for it and for the developer experience, and you can't let that up, because what I have found is even in technology companies of all stripes, not everybody really understands the developer. They tend to think about the business model and not the developer. Oh, is that a partner developer type of a thing? I'm like, what the heck is that? So and not to denigrate the thinking about partners versus not partners, but it's really what is the developer experience that you are trying to create, and how are you going to harness that so that you can let 1,000 flowers bloom, so you can have all the crazy ideas that are going to come out of the woodwork that your company's never going to think of, so that people can really expand the richness of what is possible with your API and your platform, so that you can greatly accelerate your growth in whatever market that you are in. And if you don't do that, someone's going to come behind you and they're going to woo the developer, and the developer ecosystem of that company is going to eat your lunch.
And we've seen that history repeat itself for the last three or four decades in this industry. I mean,
I
it's the
think
companies that got the developers are the companies that ultimately won.
I think Amazon is going to eat Apple's lunch in the home, because if you see what they're doing with their APIs around Alexa, et cetera, I mean, in the way they're going to make everything connect and how they're going to open it up to everybody, I think the Apple TV is a lost opportunity for a first mover.
Well, we just saw, yesterday or the day before, where Apple said, we're going to open up Siri. I mean, that's a direct response.
Finally.
Late.
Yeah.
Not to pick on them, because there are many beautiful things about Apple, but that's a great example.
So one thing that resonated with me there is the thousand flowers blooming, and you hear about that all the time. And the addition to that is they need nutrients, right? They're not going to bloom on their own. Like, it's
the desert is not a good environment for flowers.
And I think the big thing that's missed a lot of times is that in order to have a successful developer platform, you need to make your developers rich. Like they need to be incentivized to use your API. I see a lot of APIs out there where I look at them, I go, that's a fantastic API, and I think that you stuck to the standards of REST perfectly there. And this is awesome. Why would I want to use it? And they go, well, you can make this really cool thing. I'm like, okay, that's utility, awesome. And then I go, why would I want to build a business on this? And then there's a long pause, and they really don't have anything. So really, it's the revenue aspect.
I was going to say 99-cent applications that you download from the Google Play or App Store, but you guys just convinced me that the apps are going away, so there's not going to be a business model there.
You could only have so many tip calculators, though, right? Like when Android first came out, I had my G1 and flipped it open and took a look at the apps, and it was like tip calculator, Minesweeper, fart button. Like it was just like, it was just, you look at these apps and you're just like, what are these? Everyone's going to pay 99 cents for all these things? It's really just about,
probably not.
it's about creating innovation and allowing people to build businesses on your API, which Capital One and DocuSign have in spades, and that's what we're trying to get to now. And
that sounds like sage advice, real wisdom from your experience. So we got about a minute and a half left, so I'm going to ask, in addition to that advice, parting words, Naveed, like based on your experience, AOL, PayPal, Capital One.
Building a platform business, sustaining it is hard work. I mean, don't think that this is an easy job. But I think you have to have the passion for it, right? Like, so one thing which I have lived through all of this is like, have the passion and drive to kind of like build a business and see it through. The two parting advices that I can actually give to the audience is like, one, be transparent with them. And when I mean transparent with them, it's like, hey, be upfront with them. Like, what's your heat map? Are you actually going to be competing with them, or you're not going to be competing with them? Like, just set the guardrails for the developers so that they know where they stand if they're building their business utilizing your APIs. And second thing is be available. A lot of people do lip service by saying that, hey, I'm available to the community, but when someone else is actually writing their email or responding back to it, like, show up at the events, engage with your developer councils, go into the hackathons, and make your email addresses available. Mine's very easy. It's geek@capitalone.com. So if anyone wants to send me an email, that's how you get hold of me. Or even ballgeek@capitalone.com.
I was going to say, you didn't,
Yeah,
you didn't get the ball again.
So I'm like,
that got in there before you?
So it's like both of those email addresses. And
a
I
different
get
guy. It's
thousands of
Ballgeek,
emails
Capital
come
One.
from the community, and I respond them myself. And where I don't have an answer, I'll get one of my engineers to sit down with me and say, let's compose it together, let's bring them in. But that's a very key element of actually being available and being transparent.
Marie, your parting words.
Well, the one thing I would add to that, in the interest of time, is don't be so precious about your roadmap and your IP that you don't do a good job with your transparency. So one of the things I find in company after company is they're like, somebody's going to steal my ideas. Okay, in some cases, that might be true. In a lot of cases, if you're really trying to build a platform, you got to be rigorous and disciplined about early access programs and your roadmap. And you know what? If you mess up and something's wrong, then you just tell the truth about it. But share early, share often, and build the two-way relationships with your developer community so that you are building the best APIs you possibly can.
Thanks, Marie. Adam, have your wife give me a call. I'll tell her what this event is about, so she knows next time what you're up to.
I want to
She
be on the
said
phone
she
and
was
see if
gonna
you
watch the
really
video.
understand it.
And
If
tell
she
her to
really
send me.
understands your
I'll take cookies. Yeah, that's I'm fine with that. Please thank our panelists here, Naveed and Adam and Marie, for their time.